Tom, is buy-to-let truly dead in the UK?
Do I think it's dead?
But I mean, why do we think it's dead anyway? It's a big headline. Everyone uses it. Buy-to-let's dead. It's always in the newspapers. But why do they say it?
One obvious one that people have noticed, most people's mortgage payments have gone up because interest rates have gone up, obviously. And then the government seem to be wanting to regulate the sector more. They have already, things like Section 24 being a big one. New investors aren't telling me, oh, Tom, tell me about single lets. That's where the exciting stuff's happening. No, everyone's coming along saying, hey, can you tell me about how to do flats or HMOs or any other slightly higher income strategies? But the flip side of that is people who are older, more experienced, who maybe got the bigger portfolios, I asked them what their favourite investments is. They pause for a minute and they say single lets.
I'm certainly still really passionate about property. I can feel that you are as well. So it's not all doom and gloom, is it?
Building wealth through property isn't about chasing big deals and paydays. It's about owning assets that make money for you consistently. But figuring it all out on your own, that's where most people get stuck. That's why we created this Property Life membership. It's everything we wish we had when we started. Expert guidance, real-world case studies, and a private community of investors actually doing deals, not just talking about them. So you could spend years trying to piece it all together yourself, or you could plug into a system that's already working for our community. Check out our membership page at This Property Life. Everything you need to know is right there. Success is a team sport. Come join in.
Is buy-to-let finally dead? With tighter regulations and shrinking margins, many landlords are calling it quits. But today's guest has a different take. Meet Tom Dillon, seasoned property investor, director of the Great Northern Property Company, and a man with over a decade of experience riding the highs and lows of the UK housing market. From living in Japan to becoming the Lord Mayor of Norwich, and now running a portfolio in Greater Manchester, Tom brings a really unique and no-nonsense perspective on where property investing is headed. In this episode, we break down what's really going on in the market, why he's still investing when others are pulling out, and the strategies that smart investors are using to survive and thrive in 2025. So this is one conversation you do not want to miss. Let's dive in. Tom, is buy-to-let truly dead in the UK?
Before we jump in, let's tackle one of the biggest hurdles for property investors, finding the best buy-to-let locations for top returns. Over the years, we've helped countless individuals pinpoint the most profitable locations and maximise their rental income. To make it easier for you, we've put together a free guide to buy-to-let hotspots for 2025, designed specifically for you to understand the market, stay ahead of the trends, and it even includes a list of our top 10 locations in the UK. Get it now for free by clicking the link in the description below and start building your property portfolio today.
I used to be a politician, so to come up with a politician's answer, it depends who you are, and it depends what you want. If you want immediate wealth, Lamborghinis on the drive and all this, like tomorrow, and you've not started yet, best of luck with that. If you're me, for example, I've got a small to medium-sized portfolio. I'm pleased to say bread and milk seems to be on the table most days. Then do you want to get another single let? Yeah, sure, because like most property investments, it often comes down to a few things, but one of the important things is the numbers. So if the numbers say, as they did when I first started out, I first started investing roughly 2012, and in those days, in my head, and it turned out to be about right, is you'd buy something for, at the time, somewhere 60, 80,000, obviously more now, and you'd maybe spend a bit of money on it. But at the end of it, after everyone's taken their bite, as my dad would say, everyone's had their slice, you'd be left with £300 a month in your back pocket, or your front pocket, depending on what you get in cash, or your Google phone, or whatever it was. So if that's enough for you, then great. So there's two questions. One, is that enough for you? And two, can you even achieve that anymore? So one, is that enough for you, will depend who you are and what you want. To give a specific example about that is, I do some mentoring, and we have a property meeting up in the Northwest, cup of coffee, check it out, for those who don't know it. And I'd say 90% of people or more who come to that, who are new investors, aren't telling me, oh, Tom, tell me about single lets. That's where the exciting stuff's happening. No, everyone's coming along saying, hey, can you tell me about how to do flats or HMOs or any other slightly sexier, slightly higher income strategies?
Yeah, more risk, more reward, I guess.
Yeah, exactly, of course. And my guess is, I'd be interested in your thoughts on whether that's similar to what people are telling you, or and saying to you. But the flip side of that is people who are older, more experienced, who maybe got the bigger portfolios, to a person, pretty much, I asked them what their favourite investments is. They pause for a minute and they say single lets. And I think from our chat, we're the same.
Yeah. Bang on. I think, everyone chases the new strategy because it's dressed up in lots of silver foil and it shines. And they are good. And some people make really good money out of new strategies. But I think you have to be really in it and you have to be really passionate. You have to know everything about those guys. And there's lots of different funding challenges around all the new strategies that are out there. But buy-to-lets will always be the most boring and the most rewarding. And they're so fluid in terms of their flexibility. So if you need to raise cash for whatever it could be, selling your buy-to-let is going to be a lot easier than selling your 10,000 square foot commercial building or your sui generis HMO or, any of those things, because the market's bigger. So is buy-to-let dead? It's definitely challenged. As you said, it's having a bad day at the office. But is it still one of the most wonderful strategies in property investing? I'm going to say yes. Certainly for me, it definitely is. But I mean, why do we think it's dead anyway? So it's a big headline. Everyone uses it. Buy-to-let's dead. It's always in the newspapers. But why do they say it?
Well, I think there's certainly some headwinds, some well advertised headwinds. One obvious one that people have noticed, even if they've not noticed anything else, is most people's mortgage payments have gone up if they have mortgages. Not everybody does, but those who do, which includes me, it's crikey, that's doubled because interest rates have gone up, obviously. And then the government seem to be wanting to regulate the sector more, and they have already. Things like Section 24 being a big one. I won't go through that. If you've not been affected by it, Google it. But it's a big deal if you are affected by it, and also people who have been. And that's a few years ago now, but it still took a while to get used to, or in some people's cases, try and work around. So there's that, and then there's and they keep changing the name of it. So someone's gonna have to help me with the name of this. But the bill which is beefing up tenants' rights later this year, which definitely has changed name at least twice. Renters Reform Bill, is it now? And
Renters Reform, I think, or another, yeah.
Yeah, and that is tightening up the market and potentially making it less profitable by giving tenants more rights. One example, again, without running through the whole thing, would be that there's talk that the tenant would be able to move into a property, say they're going to stay there for 6 months, but then give you notice on day one. I think they'd have to give you, I can't know if it's 1 or 2 months notice within the bill, and then leave after a month or two, which clearly has, given that the average turnaround cost for a property in the UK, I think, is £3,000, as a lot of potential costs for landlords. By the way, it's important, I think, to not come across like anyone, me, you, or anyone else, and isn't saying there shouldn't be any protections for tenants, because some of these things would be a really good idea. For example, I think it was a brilliant idea that they protected deposits better than the current deposit system is much better than the old one, when everyone's deposits got nicked. So I'm exaggerating, of course, but it was certainly a lot looser. So there's a place for regulation. The question is, have they gone a bit too far with it? Only time will tell, because we don't know all the details of it yet, and we certainly don't know, as far as I know, when it's going to be implemented, as in what date it's coming in. And then the other one, which fewer people are talking about, but was definitely flagged up in a big way at the recent NRLA conference in Birmingham, I want to say, first of all, I wasn't there. This was secondhand from my business partner who was there. And he said the big thing there, especially brought up by the head of the NRLA, whose name I forget, Google it, was talking about the new EPC, I was calling EBD, EPC changes, which again, you'll probably be aware of, but some of your listeners might not be. And I'm not saying I'm the knowledge on them, but they're talking about tightening those up significantly, probably improving them in terms of making positive green changes. I'm a green person, so I'm generally in favour of all this stuff. But it's an interesting idea that, for example, the legislation talks about how you might need to spend, I think is it up to £15,000 to...
I think it's banded at the moment, but as you say, detail is scarce. So
yeah, and then let's imagine it's 5k, 10k, 15k. Given that if we're talking about a good property, maybe turning out £3,500 a year net profit, say, and let's say you've got to spend 10 grand, that means you've got to give 3 years of your net income, hard-earned income, away to improve a property. It's great that the property's improved, but it's less good that you've got no money in your pocket. So, and if you're maybe in your, I'm no spring chicken, but if you're in your 50s or 60s and coming to the end of your lettings journey and looking to maybe cash out and do something else, that might speed that decision on. I was reading somewhere that we are down, is it I don't want to come up with a number because that'll be wrong, but we're definitely down a net number of landlords last year, and some people will be cheering and out in the streets with bunting for that, right? That'll be great news, same as if we're down traffic wardens or accountants. But amongst landlords and certainly amongst tenants, who are the ones trying to find the properties, this is less good news because they're the ones who the government are trying to protect, and the law of unintended consequences could mean they're the ones that end up getting punished, which would be a real shame.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think those three big things, the EPC, the renters reform, potential consequences, as you say, yes, they need protection and it does need to be tightened up. We don't know the details of any of that. And then, the rise in cost of your mortgage as well. Those three things, they scare people out of the market without them even being actually implemented. We don't know the detail on 2 out of 3 of those things, and one of them changes quite a lot. So, yeah, I think there'll always be retiring landlords, but I think there's more accidental landlords who are going, this is just too hard, I'm off. However, always we get new people coming into the property investment and saying, I want in on this. I love property, and, I think that this could achieve some of my goals. We're saying, yeah, buy-to-lets are a beautiful part of your portfolio, but can you actually make them work? Because there are places in the UK now that it used to be a good cash yield, but now it's not. So I'm sure parts of Manchester, the prices have risen dramatically. And I know rents have also, but does it even still work in parts of Manchester that you've got your buy-to-lets?
Yes, but again, it's more challenging. So it comes down to the numbers. The stuff I tend to buy now tends to be through people I know, through networks that I have, and so I tend to get deals that aren't readily available on Rightmove. And it's worth noting as well, I'm not pretending I'm not a massive property investor, insert name here. So I'm doing 1 and 2 deals a year because I spend a lot of time playing table tennis and cycling and doing great things. I was rereading one of my heroes, Felix Dennis. His book's called something tongue-in-cheek, like How to Get Rich. He wrote it when he had terminal cancer and he was on his way out, and he was a man who knew how to make money. But he said one of the main things you should try and do is retire by the time you're 40. And as I'm 45, I was like, I'm already too late. So I'm meandering again. Does buy-to-let work in Manchester? So it depends how much you're buying them for. To be less facetious and try and give a straight answer to a straight question, but you need to get a good mortgage deal. You need to get, in my opinion, you need to get a good deal, like not just any old house on any old street. Put it in simple language. In 2012, when I started, you could buy more or less anything. Not everything, but pretty much the average stuff would get you that 300 a month figure I was talking about. In fact, on an old presentation I used to talk about how I was specialising in overmarket or OMV deals, because the first 2 properties I bought, the first one was on the market for 47,500 and I managed to agree for 52, which was not the way you were supposed to be going with the numbers then or now. But even with that, and there was some context to that, surprisingly enough, but even with those figures, I still ended up with the 300 in my back pocket. Now, what's a decent mortgage rate? Again, it depends on the person. But if you're looking at 4.5%, 5% for a 2-year fix or 5-year fix, whatever it is, well, on 100 grand, that's on 100 grand loan. That's surprisingly enough about £5,000 a year, and that's £400 a month. So if you rent 900, your mortgage is 400, and these are just some random figures, but ballpark correct. And you've got some some other costs. Well, then, okay, maybe you can make that work, but you still got to find a deposit and maybe some refurb money. So maybe 30 or 40 grand in for your 300 a month. So again, that comes down to the person. Does that work for you? Clearly it's working for somebody, because otherwise no houses in Manchester would sell. Well, I suppose they'd sell to first time buyers, but no investors would buy them, and clearly some investors are buying them. But I think if you start looking at being a little bit more creative, and this again depends on the person. So I want to be careful. It's not right for everyone to be creative. That sounds a bit like I'm saying that people aren't creative. My point is, for some people, I met a guy, one of the most successful investors I've ever met, really liked doing single lets, as we've been talking about, and he does nothing else, and he doesn't do anything creative at all, and he hates creative. He stays well clear of creative, and that really works for him. So creative isn't for everyone, whether it's buying flats above shops, or buying 2 units in one sort of thing, or buying a big terrace and turning it into, whether it's HMO or whether it's a small small block of apartments, small number of units apartments. Like that's all great stuff. But don't assume that because I'm saying it's a possibility, it will definitely work for you. Because some people should just do single lets or not do property at all. It's not for everyone.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a lot of things that can come along and whack you at the kneecaps to just give you a little are you sure you're in the right game kind of nudge. And there's lots of things that are a little bit more difficult in property.
That's right. What do you think about, I realise you're hosting and I'm guesting here, but just as it's a conversation, what do you think about in your areas? Are you still investing? Do you still think there's the margin in it for you, what you're doing? Or like, how do you make it work?
Yeah, so I think, so I'm Merseyside. Majority of my, all my single lets are up in Merseyside. Yeah. And, I think we've spoken about this off air as well. The way that we've made it work, because I still love them, I think they're brilliant, is things like buying multi-unit blocks. So if I buy a multi-unit block, well, I can do what I kind of want with that multi-unit block afterwards. It could go to, supported living. It could go to serviced accommodation. It depends on the area and all of those kind of things. Or it could go to 7 buy-to-let ASTs, which is kind of what we've done. And that's really worked for us because, and the most recent one that we did was we bought a row of 5 houses, terraced houses. They're all next door to each other. They actually make up the whole road. So in effect, I could brag and say that I bought a road, but I haven't. I mean, I kind of have, but it's just 5 houses. And we bought them. Funny story on this one. So it's always about the sourcing, isn't it? You've sort of said, yeah, I get it from networks and people I know that are going to, give me leads that I can follow up on. So my other half was up in our investment area, doing some work on another project that we had. Met a guy in the pub who said, I recognise you from when you were on a TV programme about property. And he said, oh, okay, yeah. So they got chatting about property. He went, have you checked out those 5 houses on that street there? And Rick went, no, didn't even know they're up for sale. And he went past the next day and there was like a handmade for sale sign, like really up high up on these houses on the gable end. So rang the number, actually went through an agent, but it just wasn't to be found. They weren't particularly great at what they were doing. Rang up, problems with the title, rents were completely under market value. And it was a guy that had died basically. So it's his kids selling off the estate. So we bought that with a mortgage. And 18 months later, after rent increases, did no work to them, sorting out all the problems with the titles and all of that sort of stuff, we pulled out 150k from that, and they still cash flow us per property about 280 to 330 depending on the rents at the moment. So that's like one of my most favourite buys. And so is buy-to-let dead? No, but I had to find them in a different way, and then we had to sort out some issues that they had which actually weren't around refurb.
Yeah. That sounds obviously a great deal. Was that, no, we don't need to get into every line, but just broadly speaking, was that essentially a solicitor problem? Like, hey, we've got a problem with these titles. Could you fix this, please? Was it? I'm sure it was more involved than that, but was that broadly it?
That was it, broadly, yeah. So it was something that other people might kind of think, oh, well, I don't know how to do that, or oh, that sounds complicated, or maybe that leads to a bigger complication that I don't know about. Whereas we were like, yeah, that seems like a standard thing that a solicitor's going to sort out for me. Pay a solicitor, get that done, and it was done. So, yeah, I think the other ones that we've done up there, I'm trying to think now, in the most recent of times, have I bought a single buy-to-let in a traditional manner? And you know what? I could probably say no. So the ones before that, an old commercial building that we converted into 3 buy-to-lets and held them all. So is buy-to-let dead? No, but maybe you've got to come at it from a different angle. And, that's one of your stories as well, isn't it? So you're currently doing a project, which could be 3 buy-to-lets at the end of it.
Sure. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, absolutely. So it's the planning have knocked it back to 2 now, so it's 2 flats, and it's very much an ongoing project. But happy to talk about it. I think they're sometimes more exciting because there's something actually still happening. And if anyone is coming up to Manchester or lives there and wants to come and check this project out, because we're getting close to the build stage and wants to see something like this, then by all means contact me. I'm sure we'll post the contacts with the podcast, and more than happy to show people if they're interested. And we're not looking for investment, by the way. That's not a way to get your money off you. I mean, you can throw money at me if you like, but we don't. That's not why I'm doing it. Speaking of funny kind of origin stories, or I'm not sure if that's the right word, finding the deal stories. My parents were out looking for a place for themselves. They were looking to move close to my sister because they were sick of being stuck on the traffic on the motorway in Manchester at the M60. So, right, okay. And they're out looking, but my dad is in property in a very different way to me, but he taught me a lot of what I know in terms of the basics of how to do single lets and all sort of the initial stuff. And so he's always got he's got a nose for this kind of thing. And as he's looking at this house, within a few seconds he's like, "Yeah, I don't like this. But what about that?" And he saw this sort of wreck on the corner, and in a very nice area of Manchester, very very well to do. So that's unusual to see that there. A bit like you were saying with yours, there's, whether it's a man in a pub or a dodgy sign or just a wreck in an area that shouldn't be a wreck. I think there's definitely a 5% of what we do is a bit of sleuthing or a bit of having a nose for this, which partly comes with time, but partly any fool, and I mean that directed at myself, any fool can do it or smell it. Like what's going on here? Something's not right. And in a property sense, and if you get that, if you get your spidey senses tingling, follow them up, because you end up with deals like yours or the deal I'm about to just briefly talk about now. So we found out that it was a long time ago. It had been a shop with a flat above it. The gentleman, family had been living there. Unfortunately, some people had passed away. He was still around, but he'd moved around the corner. And that was the tricky bit, to find out where he was, because he was an older guy, and we needed to go and speak to him. And always worth thinking about when you're doing this kind of thing, that you won't be the first person who's tried. Well, you're very likely you're going to be the first person who's noticed this. You might be, and great if you are, but it's probably a safe assumption you're not. And so, what have you got that no one else has got? Perseverance can be something. Persistence can be exactly the same thing, because it's a synonym. But you got to go find out what your advantage is, and then use it, because that way you solve the person's problem, and you get the deal and get the win-win, which is what you're after. So what did I decide once I got the guy's address? What I decided was, I thought there's a good chance that lots of people have gone to ask this, let's put it politely, ask this guy about his derelict property around the corner, which was on a main road, so really easy to see. And sure enough, it turned out later that was absolutely the case. He was getting bothered 3 or 4 times a day. I thought, what have I got that no one else has got? And the answer was my dad, who was the same. I could work out was probably about the same age as this guy, and that shouldn't matter, but maybe it does. And I also worked out maybe this guy isn't the proudest about how he's let his got the place get, because he had some health problems and all this, so it certainly wasn't his fault. But he might feel a bit ashamed about how the place had gone a little bit south. And so I thought, well, so I turned up, and my dad led the way. So my dad was in front, and me and my partner was standing behind, and my dad chatted to the guy, and they were the same age, and we just sat there, and my dad negotiated the deal with him, and you could tell he was very frosty to start with, very like he'd been having a lot of these conversations with people, and well, he'd probably been slamming door in people's faces, but we basically got through the door, had the conversation with him, and after a couple of conversations, we were able to seal the deal, and that's where we got the deal from. So no deal is the same. So we told 2 very different origin stories there, but I think there are threads that you can pick up for your next.
The thread is, this is a people business, not a bricks and mortar business.
Yeah. Or 90% of people business, 10%. I mean, you need both, but you're absolutely right, and I'm being picky. So yeah, that's absolutely it. So then we secured it, and we got a very good deal on it. So it was Kiyosaki who said, you make your money when you buy, not when you sell. So that gives you a real feel of confidence then that we bought a rate, first of all, that works for this gentleman to be able to move on with his life. But so we're not taking advantage of anyone. But what we have done is make sure we've got a deal where even if there's a few problems, we're going to have enough in it to make sure that it's a profitable deal for us at the end, because that's what we're doing this for. So then we started with what I call the planning dance. I'd welcome your thoughts on the planning dance, but I find it's very much more of an art than a science. I wish it was a science, because I think I'm better at science than art, and I've certainly science that I am dance. But it really just seems to depend on the council. And in Greater Manchester, there are 13, I think, 12 or 13 councils that make up the Greater Manchester area. I don't know how many it is in Liverpool and Merseyside, but I imagine it must be 4 or 5 at least. The point is that even between Salford and Ashton and Bolton and Rochdale and Oldham and Manchester itself, there's very different ethos, and even within the ethos, then your contact is one person. So you can work out the ethos. I'll give you an example. Manchester don't like HMOs. Manchester City Council, that is not the whole. They really don't like them. Might be a strong word. They don't accept them through on planning. Okay, but then you might get with the one person who does like them. You're like, oh, crikey, I thought I had a handle on this, and then I haven't at all. Another one we've had before is where you've done pre-planning, and I've heard different opinions on whether pre-planning is a good idea or not. For those who don't know, it's the idea that you sort of put in some broad plans, and then the council tip you the wink, that and give you some advice, by the way. I'm not being facetious about it. They give you some advice on if you did this or if you did that. Which you pay for. You pay for tipping the wink. That they'll tell you or give you some guidance on what might be agreeable to the council and what might not be. Thing is, we've done that a couple of times, and once it went really well. And the other time they gave us the big thumbs up the whole way through, and then the end went no, no dice. So you're like, right, well, there's $2,000, and if we just put planning in, we could have found out much quicker because, of course, as you know, and as a lot of the people listening will either know or shortly find out, a lot of the costs to do with property, especially empty ones, is the cost of holding them with nothing going on. There's, depending on how you hold them and whether it's with your own money or somebody else's, or whether it's with bridging finance or something like that, there's a cost of holding an empty property. So that, that old phrase, time is money, comes back to bite you. And so trying to do this quickly, but obviously properly, is quite challenging. With this then, so we went originally for 3 flats in the building, and without again getting into any of the weeds with a development unseen, but just trying to keep it interesting and sort of broad brush, is they didn't like that we'd broken the building line. I think that's the right architectural phrase. So there's a line, if you look along the street of, in this case, semi-detached houses, there will typically be a line. At the back, they might have all extensions and higgledy-piggledy and all sorts, but on the front, often there'll be a straightish line, as straight as they could make it in 1930. And we wanted to build a little bit out just to get some stairway up to make the 3rd flat viable, and they weren't going to have it. They were very against that. Okay, fair enough. Like, I disagree with them, but that's a legitimate opinion for a planning authority to have. So you can either get your knickers in a twist, as my mum would say, or you can get on with it. And so we decided to do as usual, do the latter. And that comes into making sure you have a plan B and a plan C. And the bigger the project gets, the more letters you need. Like if you're doing a single let house, probably, like when I'm doing single let houses, I don't really have a plan B because I don't know what a plan B would be at that, but knock it down, build a golf course. Like there's limited number of plan Bs. But when you're doing anything bigger than that, I would strongly recommend having a plan B. And the good news is that plan B is typically the same plan B. So if you can do flats, typically a plan B will be to do HMO, or maybe to do it as a single dwelling, depending on the size of it, etc., etc. It's not rocket science, but it's a good idea to make sure that at least plan B works. And so we'd already done that, and we got as far as plan C, and plan B and C worked. And plan B was simply to do 2 larger flats. So that's what we put permission in for. That's what we got eventually got planning permission for, and that's what we're going to develop out. We're at the stage now of getting builders in. A couple of useful points, I'd say, again, trying to give some value to the listeners, depending where they are, but maybe if they're thinking about doing bigger deals, I'd say, especially if you're at the point of having done some single lets or not, but maybe especially if you have, or done something in property, maybe you're professional in the area, but then you're looking to do it for yourself and you're looking to do some slightly bigger deals. I'd say a couple of things that maybe I wish someone had told me or confirmed to me when I started doing the larger deals. And this is about as small a bigger deal as you can get, i.e. 2 units. It probably just about qualifies as it's not 1 unit, but only just. But we have done some bigger stuff than that. We've done some small blocks of apartments. So I think I'm just about qualified to speak on this. And the thing that I'd say is, one is, I'll shoot from the hip and we'll see how many we get in the list. But one is, there's not that much difference on a positive point. There's not that much difference between single lets and bigger deals. There are some differences, but you're still basically using the same tools. You're still going to have people turn up and do works for you, and surveys get done, and you have to make some decisions based on often incomplete information. And then you're going to try and get some lending, and then you're going to try and make the whole thing profitable. And then you or an agent on your behalf is going to manage the whole thing. So there's a lot of similarities. And so I'd definitely be afraid, but don't be so afraid that it paralyzes you. I nearly was, and that would have been a mistake. That's just funny enough. Why me and business partner Chris got together was because we both were terrified. We didn't say it in these words at the time. Only later looking back did we admit, yeah, we were both terrified. So that's why we decided to split the risk, and also had complementary skills, so we could do that. So I'd say don't be terrified of it. Get cracking with it. And then on the sort of other side, maybe the thing to be aware of on the negative side maybe the wrong word, but on the side to be cautious of is there are a lot more surveys to do and preparatory work to do before you're able to get people on site on a large deal, and you need to factor that into your timings. So whatever time you think it's going to take, either speak to someone who's done similar stuff and they'll tell you how long and they'll give you a sense, maybe a guess of how long it'll be, and it'll probably be longer than you're thinking, or just double what you're thinking and you won't be that far out, especially the first one. So whether it's asbestos surveys, bat surveys, contaminated land surveys, the list goes on. And it also goes on that it's not just that, like, okay, we need all the surveys. No. You need them in set order. And often it needs to be checked by people who aren't working this week and it's a bank holiday. And then you also, their wives or husband's poorly, so they can't come in today. And then often it's, the fire authority have come back with something on the planning. It's happened to us months later after the planning had been sorted. And so now we need to do some of this stuff again. Like, okay, so as long as you factored in your time on that and put it into your numbers on how much we're paying per month on the interest or whatever it might be, then you're fine.
And an incredible cost associated with those bits of paper that have to associate with that property. So heritage statements and, as you say, bat surveys and asbestos surveys and, M&E designs and fire plans. I feel sometimes when I'm working on the bigger projects, all I'm doing is giving money to other people to give me bits of paper that once the project's all up and running, especially on any of the design stuff, have probably changed, because in reality, it didn't quite work because it's just a paper exercise. But maybe I'm being cynical. Maybe I should
I think you've been absolutely spot on. Like, I'd missed the piece about not just the cost of holding the property for a long time, but the cost of actually the paperwork. I forget which one it was, but some survey or other we did was like $2,000, and the architects and things can be 10. So it can get expensive. The other one I'd say, the big difference, and I'll stop witching on, but I think this is an important one. The listeners get to decide, as always, is with a single let. Typically, most people, I think, will often self-manage that stuff. Don't get me wrong, you can get especially if it's a larger job on a single let, you can get a main contractor and he comes in, does the lot and sends you a bill. But most people I know will manage that process themselves, hire an electrician, hire a painter, especially for lighter refurbs. But on a bigger deal, typically that decision becomes a lot more on the edge, by which I mean you can pay quite a bit more and have a main contractor and they will look after everything and send you a bill and that's it. In theory, in practice, it can be a lot more complicated than that, but that's a skinny version. Or you can self-manage with all the messiness and cheapness that implies is in fact true. I can say, after having done both, that what you would think is the case is in fact the case. So you can rest easy on that, dear listeners. So then you've got to make that decision. Well, obviously it comes down to numbers again. What kind of savings are going to make? What kind of time do I need to put into it? Have I got that time? Or if you're, for example, a well-paid person, so you're cash rich and time poor, well, then that's an easy decision. You need to pay somebody else to do that because you don't have the time to do it. But if you're not that, then you can balance it out. So we've just got quotes in for this job, and they've come in a little bit quite a bit higher than we expected, and so we're like, maybe we'll self-manage because we'll save quite a significant amount of money by doing that. So that's the kind of decision you face.
So let's go back to that deal. So we've got a shop and top on a high value area, which you've now got planning for 2 flats. How many bedrooms in each flat?
Both 2. One much bigger than the other, but both 2.
Great. So 2 good size flats. Now, there are probably, and I've had this myself, we've had lots of, members who are investing in different areas of the country. It could be the Northeast, it could be down in Wales, and they'll find lots of shops and tops which are, essentially look like a house and therefore probably could be converted into 2 flats or even 3 flats. And they kind of go, yeah, so I'm going to do this because it kind of, it sounds like, the building shows that it could do that. But the difference being that the cost, and as you've already indicated, you've got a quote back that's a lot higher than you'd hoped. The cost of actually converting some of these shops and tops or bigger houses into smaller units is really high at the moment. And, it's if I go back 10 years ago, it was doable in more areas. And now the amount of areas where that works is being squeezed. So it's not that this strategy can work in an area where the end value of that flat is going to be 50k. And there's still plenty of those places around. So you've chosen this area because the numbers work. So is there a bit of a tick list as to, look, just don't bother looking in unless your end values are at this type of range?
Yeah, well, whenever I drive through Kensington and Chelsea, which I've got to say is frighteningly rare, but when I do, or insert wealthy area here, there are wealthy areas around Manchester too. Maybe not compete with Chelsea and Kensington, but your Alderley Edges, your Wilmslow, your Didsbury's. What's the wealthiest area of sort of your patch? Merseyside, Liverpool, sort of a way, a Wirral.
Yeah, so I guess what we've got the Wirral parts, so it'd be like the New Brighton. So, the nicer areas of the Wirral going down. So either going, as you go across the river, you either go right up to the top and over the back end, or you go down south into sort of the Cheshire kind of areas. So that part, there's some lovely properties there. Birkdale, in just in sort of Southport and Merseyside. But, to an extent, and this is moving into Lancashire, there's some nice little villages as you move out of Southport or towards Ormskirk. You can still, the property prices are a little bit higher. In Liverpool itself, around Sefton Park, but a lot of those massive big properties have already been done. They're beautiful, incredible buildings around Sefton Park, and a lot of them are now flats. And is the price of one of those houses, if it were to come up, is it good enough? Is the GDV good enough on those flats with the cost? I think you'd have to get it at good steel.
Yeah, fair enough. So now that's good. We're going to canter through for anyone interested in the northwest of places probably not to invest, or certainly not to invest on for cheap single let stuff. But we were talking about whenever I drive through or travel through those wealthier areas, you see a lot of building works. I think the place with the most building works per square foot anywhere in the United States is Bel Air. And why is that? Because in those areas it works to, the classic one would be to gut out, if you're in Kensington, you've got a 2-bed, 2 up, 2 down, there aren't that many left, but there are some. They will dig out the basement and you will, do a loft conversion, and you will, if you can, put another 2 stories on it. Why? Because it's 3 million quid a square metre or whatever it is. It's worth doing lots of work. And at the other end, as you say, in areas which, I've certainly invested in cheap and cheerful areas, so I know those areas well. M38 is still one of the more, if not the most cheap and cheerful area with an M postcode that I know. That's Little Holton for anyone not paying attention. And you don't see many basement conversion companies around there, because, or loft conversion companies, the economics just aren't there. So I think it's a case of, like, it goes back to, if you come to a property and saying, should we do this or should we do that? I almost think it's the wrong way around. It should start from, where are we looking to invest? What's our gold mine area, to steal the phrase? Okay, this is our area, and what we're trying to do, we're trying to do some flats, and we're going to do cheap and cheerful. We're simply going to do tickle up some flats, or maybe the kind of thing. We're going to buy a street of terrace houses, and whatever it is. So your strategy is going to be decided as soon as, before you've even got there. So it wasn't like we bought this property and then went, oh, what should we do with it? It was already part of our strategy that might be the kind of thing we'd look for. I mean, we were lucky how we found it. That was, there's a slice of good fortune there. What is it? Looks when preparedness meets opportunity. So luck can look like luck, but it's actually more than that. But whatever it is I don't think anyone should be surprised, when they find a deal as to what they're going to do with it. If they are, then it suggests to me that the process has been wrong of how they've ended up in this place.
How they started there, yeah. But in terms of this deal that you're looking at, when you have completed the works, what will be your indicative value for those each of those 2-bed flats?
I think they'll both be worth together, and it's TBC, right? A bit of a piece of string question, but I think the GDV, the done up value, as people say, would be a whisker shy of 500,000, so 450 somewhere there.
Yeah, so we're looking at, and obviously one's bigger than the other, and they're not going to go for exactly the same, but we're looking at a roughly 2-bed flat going for, post 200 to 230 kind of thousand. So I think that is a really important point, because if you're in an area where flats are going for 50 to 100k, 100k to maybe 150k, it's just not going to work, because the cost of the conversion with all, it's all about fire safety at the end of the day, isn't it? And double boarding and pink boarding and everything boarding, and it's expensive.
Acoustics as well, blue boarding for acoustics. That's a big thing these days. They've really tightened up on the acoustics, and rightly so, because who wants to listen to their neighbour dancing around? So it's good stuff, but it costs the developer to do that.
Yeah. So it is one of those where this isn't a strategy that works everywhere, but at the end of it, what you get is 2 incredible flats with a good GDV. And you can either sell them and walk away with your profit and enjoy yourself on a lovely bike ride out in Japan. Or you can keep them in your portfolio and know that in your back pocket, you've got something that is generating you a good cash flow each month. Might not be setting the world alight, but equally, it'll be all right. And at some point in the future, you can always sell them. So it is one of those where, is buy-to-let dead? No. But you've got to do it a little bit differently. Unless, of course, as you said at the beginning, your goals are different and your starting position is a bit different. So if, for example, we know quite a lot of overseas investors who are buying with a different currency. So there's currency fluctuations that they can really benefit from. Yes, there's higher stamp and, they don't know the areas as well and all of that sort of stuff. But equally, they want property in the UK. So they want to have that in their portfolio. So their KPIs are way different from mine and yours KPI, which is, completely different from someone starting out for the first time as well. So the competition level is not always level, is it?
Absolutely not. No, we've had a lot of, I don't know if it's the same there, and I think we had a lot of Hong Kong money come into Manchester, and I imagine lots of other parts of the UK as well, but I only really paid much attention to what's going on in Manchester, and that's them, people trying to get money out of Hong Kong for all kinds of reasons that are none of my business, but it means that they've come in with, very different priorities and KPIs. I chatted to one guy on site who's quite honest. He said, "I don't need this to make any money. I just need a place to put my money," and that's great. That's his incentive, So that meant for me, this has become very difficult, more difficult because I'm now facing competitors who don't need to have maybe a slightly lower bar, if that's a fair way of putting it, than I need to hit. So that's that. I'd say just going back a stage with the 2 flats, another option for anyone thinking, in terms of thinking about plan Bs and Cs, and we've not decided what we're doing with ours yet, but a couple of things I'd worth mentioning is if you get 2 flats or even 10 flats, one thing you can do is the old sell 2, keep 8, or buy 1, sell 1, keep 1. That can work really nicely because you essentially cover all your costs. So costs have gone up, okay, but if you sell 1, you get some of your money back out, and maybe you've got that 1 flat or those 8 flats, whatever it might be, without any with an infinite return because you've got all your money out of the deal. The other one is freeholds. Outside of the scope of this our cheeky chat here to talk in depth about freeholds. But when you have a block of apartments, even 2, you then have a freehold that needs to look after essentially the skin of the building, if you like, and the land, and that has a value in and of itself, and you could look to sell that or keep that as another asset. So you kind of, even with 2 flats, you end up with 3 assets, which is quite nice.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hopefully today, Tom and I have spoken about some of the downsides of property and some of the things that really frustrate us. And it's no surprise that same things frustrate both of us. But, hopefully also you can see some of the opportunities that are still out there. I'm certainly still really passionate about property, and I can feel that you are as well. So it's not all doom and gloom, is it?
No, it's a nice day. It's a nice day, and the single lights are still standing, and I still got bread and milk on the table. So I'm delighted, and I imagine you are. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to speak to you today.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, Tom. I think we'll have to have you on again because as people can see, our minds are like going off all different directions and thinking, oh gosh, yes, let me talk about this. And this is really interesting. So I think we've probably got a lot more to say on the subject of property generally. But for today, we just wanted to, I guess, just show people that buy-to-let is still there. It's still a lovely, lovely strategy. It's one of my most favourite. Maybe you've got to think a little bit differently about it. But equally, if you're willing to put the hard yards in and the time and the effort, there's still the single buy-to-let that needs a bit of work doing, that if you buy it right and you source it correctly, as Tom has already said, as Robert Kiyosaki said, it's making money when you buy. So I think it's still great. If people want to get hold of you, Tom, what is the best way to get in touch?
Just chase me down the street. I'm not as quick as I used to be. They'll catch me up fast.
Really done a strike is reasonably quick.
Yes. If they go to, I don't know if people have heard of Google, go there and search for Property28, one word, and especially if they put it on, on Udemy, which is that educational thing. We've just launched a lovely little program on there. People can check that out. It's been so low key that we haven't told that this is the first time I've mentioned it to anyone. So I'll be excited to see
privileged.
on that. Or just visit bestpropertymentoring.com. Is another way to get me.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Tom, and enjoy the rest of your sunny day. And no doubt we will catch up soon.
Been a real pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching and listening.